Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of our baseball podcast. Joined, as always, by David Swor. I am DJ Cox. And David, we have finally got him on the show. It's been a long time coming. We've been trying to do this for a very long time. One of our former teammates at Temple, Ryan Hill, has joined us tonight. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us tonight, buddy.
Man, it's good to be on here with you guys. Looking forward to it.
Appreciate it, man. And today is the Hall of Fame day. We just sat through the show and found out who is all going to be making it. We're going to get into that pretty much to start the show here. We had 7 guys inducted this year, David, and this doesn't normally happen with the Veterans Committee. They don't even induct a lot of people very often, too. Doesn't really happen. So this is a huge class. It's going to be a lot of fun this summer. I thought it should have been a little bit more going into this class, but we'll get into that as well, David. So just kind of starting here, we're gonna go with the Veterans Committee to start with here. Just kind of talk about these guys a little bit to start out with, and then we'll get into what the writers did tonight. Some of the guys that are going in. The first guy, Buck O'Neil. Now, David, this one's kind of obvious to me. If you're putting him in as an executive, not as a player, because if you look at his player numbers in the Negro Leagues, nothing's going to really stand out to you. He had a 258 career average with 9 home runs and 175 RBI, which is not even close to Hall of Fame. But as far as the Negro Leagues go, he's the face of it, to be honest with you. Like, he really is. Buck O'Neil, when you think Negro Leagues, he pops into your head, and one of those 4 guys that'll do it, like Josh Gibson, Buck O'Neil. Those guys pop into your head right away. He's the founder of the Negro League Museum in Kansas City, which if you end up going to a Royals game, that's a must. You got to check that out. Go to the Negro League Hall of Fame for sure, and make that a part of your stay when you go see a Royals game. But yeah, he died in 2006 at the age of 94. So what a life he lived. He established the Negro Leagues Museum, like I said, and a great ambassador. He also was a scout. Ryan, he found Lou Brock, Hall of Famer, who he was a scout for the Cubs, and the Cubs actually had Lou Brock early in his career and made one of the dumbest trades in the history of the world, sending him off to the Cardinals in a trade that my dad will not let die to this day, letting Lou Brock, Hall of Famer, go for pretty much nothing. But what a career, man. He's an ambassador. He's a scout. He was even a coach as well. So there's a lot that he did in the game of baseball. And like I said, one of the faces of the Negro Leagues. David, what are your thoughts on Buck O'Neil?
I mean, what took so long, right? Yeah. I mean, why we got to wait until a guy passes away to recognize what he did? And this is a lot my problem. I got lots of problems with the Hall of Fame. We could have a real heated episode tonight, and we probably are going to, but this is one of them. I mean, what's the holdup? The guy, like you said, is the face of the Negro Leagues. You know, if he deserves to be there.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. What took so long is a very good question. I don't know how he slips through the cracks on this kind of stuff. Buck O'Neil, just awesome. Glad he finally got in. Another guy that got in, Bud Fowler. He played at the turn of the 1800s into the 1900s. Fowler played in the Negro Leagues, and they didn't keep stats back then. It's kind of crazy to think of that. I was trying to look up to see his stats as a player. I think Ryan was doing this earlier too. I couldn't find anything. One thing I did find is he played second base, and he did not play with a glove. So I don't know how that happened. That's old.
Can I say something right here, DJ? Yes. I tried to Google, but I don't even know his first name, Bud Fowler. I'm sorry. I don't want to be irreverent here. But you know what the first thing that popped up was? What is Bud Fowler famous for? How are we going to put somebody in the Hall of Fame? We don't have any stats. We don't know anything about him, and is not famous. I'm sorry. I don't get this one at all.
Yeah, this one was hard for me. Every time you search something on him, it was like, well, Mr. Johnson said he was an awesome player, you know.
Is he real? Like, I mean, what? Is this a joke? Are we getting punked? You know what I mean? Like I said, I don't want to be irreverent because, man, maybe he was the man. But how would we know? We have no stats.
Yeah. And I think part of it from when I was researching on him was that they were saying that part of it was that he had broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball before Jackie Robinson. He doesn't get as much credit for it. And I think that that's probably part of what happened with him.
Okay.
And I agree. Like same as what we were saying with even the guy before with Buck O'Neill. You wait so long that a lot of these guys, they don't even get the credit or even acknowledge for some of the things that they did.
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. So, I mean, if he played in the 1880s, is that right?
Yep.
He would have broke the color barrier in the 1890s or whatever. So I had no idea.
So that brings an interesting point. You're exactly right, Ryan. So if now he wasn't given credit because it wasn't the major leagues that he broke into, but now they are associating the Negro Leagues as major leagues. So maybe he's the guy now, you know what I mean? Like he's the first one. If it's not Jackie Robinson anymore. If you're historically saying the Negro Leagues are the major leagues, then it's got to be him. And that's a great point. So he's the new Jackie Robinson, so to speak, and got voted in because of that. Now I got to ask you this, Ryan. So if Bud could play second base with no glove, could you have played the hot corner with no glove in college?
Absolutely not. They hit it too hard over there at third base. I mean, let's just say like second base, like they're not, unless you got that lefty power hitter up there, most of the time that's not happening. Back in that time, they were primarily right-handed hitters, I guess.
Mm-hmm. That's so
You might have been able to do it with Foster on the mound because they weren't hitting it over there most of the time.
That's right.
That might have been your only chance.
That's right.
That's a good point. Good drop in there for sure on Bud. So two of those guys are in, and the Golden Days era voted in the first one, David, Minnie Minosa. And this is part of the reason why you saw the White
What
Sox.
are we doing? DJ, what are we doing? I'm sorry. The Hall of Fame gets worse and worse for me every year. It's like to the point it's kind of getting contentious with me. I'm not even going to lie because it's just so lame. What are we even talking about? The three of the guys that got in this year shouldn't even sniff the Hall of Fame. And I'm sorry. They were all studs, I'm sure. I'm sure there's a stat or two where we could justify it a little bit. I'm sorry. This is a no-go for me all the way.
Did you get a chance to look at him at all, Ryan?
When I looked him up, I'll have to be honest, I knew like nothing about this guy. But you look at his stats, I mean, he had over 2,000 hits. Some of those things pop out at you. But the guy played for 20 years, if I looked at it right.
Yep.
And while you like to give somebody credit for a long tenured, time in Major League Baseball, I agree with Swor. I just don't think, that he has the kind of stats that I would look at and say it's Hall of Fame worthy. I mean, I just don't think he had it.
I agree with you guys both, but let me be devil's advocate here for a second. So we're talking about a major dead ball era in the 50s and 60s. Okay. This is definitely a pitcher's time in history. We know this. Okay. And he played in it. He did have 4 seasons over 100 ribbies. He did have a lot of seasons over 10 homers, which, like I said, dead ball, it was bad. I'm not justifying saying he should be in there. He's a legend on the South Side. Let me just leave it at that. Like these guys on the South Side love him and have wanted this for many, many years. And so they're definitely going to celebrate that this summer down on the South Side. Career 300 hitter, which is nothing to joke at. It really isn't. Like he's one of those guys, 275 guys in the history of the game have over 1,000 ribbies, and he's one of them too. So he's got some stuff working for him, a 53.8 WAR. I don't feel like it's enough. I don't know what we're doing with him, putting him in. To me, if you let a guy in like that, you open the door for a lot of people. I'm not really sure what to think of that. A lot of all-stars. He made 13 all-stars, which is very impressive. I'll give him that. 3 Gold Gloves and won a World Series in 1947. That was obviously not with the White Sox, but in the Negro Leagues as well. So, yeah, great career, no doubt, but not a Hall of Fame career. And I got to ask you guys this. I saw at the bottom of his baseball reference page, he retired at 38. And then he came back and played 3 games at the age of 50 and 2 games at the age of 54. What in the world?
Hey, if you can play at 54, I might actually let him in.
Yeah.
We're letting everybody in. That's a Hall of Fame statistic. If you can play when you're 54.
Ryan, you think he could suit up at 54?
Well, looking back at what you're talking about, it looked like he had 8 at bats, and he struck out twice when he was 50 years old.
Hey, the fact that he can put the bat on the ball, I mean, give him something there.
I mean, if he's pulling a Julio Franco is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, who can compete with that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only other guy that comes to my mind that was that old.
Well, there's a lot of black on that page there. He's got a lot of categories. He led the league in a lot of he got hit by pitch a lot. He led the league in hit by pitches 10 different seasons. Ryan, you got hit by a pitch a lot, didn't you?
I did actually. I'm trying to remember if it was during our fall league. I broke my hand one year. I think it was my freshman year. I took one off the hand and it broke my bone in my left hand. And
Man.
yeah, that wasn't fun. I mean, it just hit me. And on those metal bats, there's no give. I mean, it doesn't matter when they're throwing that hard. It's not going to feel good.
Nope.
I remember you getting hit a lot, man. You were definitely one of those guys that got plunked for whatever reason. So you know the feeling that he went through. So the next guy, Gil Hodges. David's shaking his head again.
What are we even talking about? I mean, look at these similarity scores on these guys, man. How you gonna put Manny Minoso in and not put Ken Griffey Sr. in? Okay. And it's the same with Gil Hodges. He had a great career. Again, I'm sure there's some Hall of Fame statistics we can pull out here or there. He's not a Hall of Famer. He's not. If we're putting Gil Hodges in and not Fred McGriff, I mean, I don't know. The Hall of Fame has turned into a joke to me, just to be honest with you. It's a popularity contest. That's proven. There's guys out of the Hall of Fame that have better statistics than guys that are getting in. And again, I'm sure Gil Hodges was a great player. 273 career hitter, not good enough. 370 homers, not good enough. I think he had right around 2,000 hits, not good enough. Shouldn't be there.
8 dominant years, which, as you know, I like 10. It's not good enough for me either. Falls just short. And we're seeing guys from the 1950s and early 60s, like Manny Minoso's in the same category, played at the exact same time. We saw a couple guys from that era get in there. Man, I tell you what, I would have loved to have been able to watch games back in those days and see how much different it was from now. And if you take into effect the era that they played in, I don't know, David, does that change things as far as the era that they're in and what they put up numbers wise? Do they only, I don't know how you look at this.
Well, listen, I think that plays a role. But my question is, if they weren't good enough when they had 10 years to get in, what makes them suddenly good enough now? I think it's a valid question. When they could have got voted in by sports writers that actually watched them play, why are we doing this 20 or 30 years later? I just don't understand it. It's, like I said, to me, it's just nonsense.
I think, when I look at his stats, like I agree with what you're saying, the fact that how would he not be voted in those days? If he was so good, surely people would have voted him in then.
Yeah.
But I think, like, even looking at his stats and taking in the dead ball, it looks like, I think if I saw it correctly, I think he's 40th in all time in home runs. I mean, it's still, and considering the time period that he was playing in, that's pretty legit on that side. He played 18 years. I mean,
yeah.
I think considering the time period that he was playing in, that's kind of the only thing I would say that maybe got me thinking maybe you could still put him in, where I wouldn't see some of these other ones like so much having a case to be in there.
And, not getting in the Hall of Fame doesn't make these guys, bad ball players. These guys are studs. Mm-hmm. There's no denying that. But the Hall of Fame should be a whole another level, and it just seems like the longer we go, DJ, the more watered down this gets. And I don't know, man. It's just, I'm over it.
So, Ryan, you made an awesome point, man. That totally made sense to me there. That's a good case for him for sure. I didn't know he was 40th overall. That's very impressive. Vin Scully, who, in my opinion, is the greatest announcer in baseball history, makes a huge case for Hodges, and he got to see him play all the time, obviously being a Brooklyn Dodger and LA Dodger all of his career, pretty much, except for the Mets there at the end. But when Vin Scully's saying you're a Hall of Famer, I'm sorry, that holds some water too, for sure. Like, I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm just saying when Vin Scully's saying you're a Hall of Famer and you're 40th overall in home runs, you got a case there at least, and something to go off of.
I mean, 370 home runs, that's nothing to scoff at. But I mean, you don't do it based off just home runs alone, but that's pretty impressive for that time period.
Yeah, in a dead ball era, you're right. I mean, how many homers would he have hit? He played in the 90s, you just don't know. I mean, that's the hard thing about this is that's how you try to distinguish between these players. Like,
you can't, but you can, because the flip side of that argument is how many guys threw over 85 miles an hour back when he played. I'm sorry, that's
a valid point.
That needs to be, you know what I mean? So you have to evaluate them in the era that they're in. I agree with that. But man, they had 10 years to get in, DJ, and didn't. I don't know.
Getting into the pitching side, the mound wasn't raised at that point, right? Like, it was more of a flat mound, and they weren't throwing near as hard.
Right.
Yep, that's a good point too. Very good points there, no doubt. And he's in, and it's going to be really cool to see these guys have their speeches and everything. They're going to go right in there beside Ortiz. It's going to be a lot of fun for sure when it comes up. And the next guy, Jim Cott. So this one I agree with. Are you in on that too? Okay,
I'm in, man.
Ryan, are you in on this one?
I am. I mean, you look at him, he's 27th in all-time wins, 25th in strikeouts, second most years of any pitcher. I mean, you look at some of those are legit. Looking at his ERA, there was some really not hot years. I mean, but you look at overall his body of work, I think it's a great case for him to be in it.
Yeah, I totally agree. 283 wins. I mean, now we're talking about 200 being the baseline. You know what I mean? I'm 100% in behind Jim Cott. Tommy John needs to be next. I'm going to keep kicking that horse until somebody listens. Tommy John's 288 wins. We say his name every day. The dude should be in the Hall of Fame. But Jim Cott, that's one they got right.
Man, you brought up exactly what I was going to say, David. So Jim Cott definitely deserves it and is getting his number retired by the Twins this summer, which is awesome to see too. So this is long overdue, but listen to this comparison. You brought up the guy who is exactly him. It's Tommy John. And Tommy John not being in the Hall of Fame is a shame. Jim Cott has a 50.5 WAR. Tommy John 61.8. Now it gets really creepy how close this comes. Jim Cott is 283 and 237. Tommy John 288 and 231. That's almost identical. They have the same ERA. Cott 345. Tommy John 334. The Ks are the same. Cott 2,461, Tommy John 2,245, and they both played from the age of 20. Cott till 44 and Tommy John till 46.
Yeah, boy.
It's like eerily similar. That's crazy. It's like Prince Fielder and Cecil Fielder. It's the same thing. These two guys are Hall of Famers, no doubt. And Tommy John, I don't know if he's on that Veterans Committee vote. He needs to be voted in immediately. Like you said, you say his name every day. He's famous. Everybody has a surgery nowadays. I don't get it why he's not in, but congrats to Jim Cott, no doubt. To be able to pitch when you're 44 years old, I don't know how they do that, man. Ryan, you think you could lace him up right now and go out there and throw him?
No, definitely not. Like, I've picked up a baseball recently, and I mean, I'd be lucky to be playing softball right now. I mean, that's impressive. 44 years old. I mean, he pitched 25 years. That's a long time.
Yeah, man. They talk about, like, and it bugs me. Me and DJ have talked about this a lot. They'll say, well, he just accumulated stats. Well, listen, that's not easy to do. There's a bunch of 22-year-old guys trying to take your job, and you're pitching when you're 46. You're a good pitcher. And so I
think of these guys that burned out. I mean, think of Tim Lincecum and all these guys.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something to be said if you can do it for a long time.
Yeah, they didn't just do that because, to help him out. You know what I mean? They did it because they were trying to win baseball games, and they thought he could still help them. Mm-hmm. That should count for something.
Mm-hmm.
It totally does, man. 16-time Gold Glove winner. I believe he's second all time in pitchers to Greg Maddux only, if I'm not mistaken. He may even have more than Greg Maddux. I know Brooks Robinson has 18, which is the most all time. So he's right there for most Gold Gloves ever by anybody. 3-time All-Star, won a 1982 World Series. Man, I don't know how a guy like this slips through the cracks. I really don't. You got seasons where he pitched over 300 innings and in the high 200s in some of those. Man, these were back when guys were men on the mound, Bulldogs and Ryan Hills and David Swor, give me the ball, and not these pansies who give up in the 5th inning and hand the ball over to the bullpen for the last 4. I hate that garbage so much. So Jim Cott, man, was a Bulldog. I love that stuff. Awesome record, man. That record's legit. His ERA is legit. So this is a no-brainer for me. I was surprised, to be honest with you. I already thought he was in. And to hear that he got in was long overdue and really cool to see. So,
yeah. And he's an announcer now, right? Am I mistaken in that?
You know what? I was just going to ask you if I know for sure he had done some announcing, and I'm not sure if he's still doing that or not. That was one thing I meant to look up, and I'm not sure if he's still doing that, but he has in the past, and he's outstanding at that as well. Like, he's a really good announcer. He's got a good baseball voice, no doubt. So that factors in a little bit too. It really does. All the contributions you make to the game, it makes you more famous and more that you get toward your Hall of Fame for sure. So,
and he is still announcing. I just looked it up.
Who does he announce for? Is it just in general for a company, or does he do a team?
I'm gonna have to look into that. I know for sure I've seen him on ESPN or Fox One recently. I'll look that up.
So we move on to another guy who got in by the Veterans Committee. The last guy to get on by the Veterans Committee is Tony Oliva. David, thumbs up or down?
Down. I mean, again, dude was a great baseball player. Just not a Hall of Famer, man. He doesn't have any Hall of Fame statistics that I know of. Not one.
Ryan, what do you think?
No, I don't think he has the stats to get in. Like, I agree with David. He was a good player, but just didn't have the kind of stats worth it.
8 dominant years, just short in my book as well. I mean, he's got a good career there. There's no doubt about it. This is a guy who also played in the 60s into the 70s as well, which was also a pitcher's type of era as well. Led the league in batting average 3 different times, a 304 hitter. So this guy could hit the baseball. There's no doubt about it. I just don't think it was long enough. He goes a few more years at that pace, and I'm on board with it. But I don't know, man. It's interesting what they did with this. It really is. There's a few guys you're like, what? There's a few guys that are obvious. He did win a Rookie of the Year award as well. 8-time All-Star, won a Gold Glove, 3-time batting title, like I said. I don't know. I really don't. I don't know what they were looking at. Did play his whole career at the Twins. What's the case, David? I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, he did have some great years in there, but I mean, we could say that about a lot of baseball players that aren't in the Hall of Fame. And like I said, he just didn't accumulate enough, in my opinion. What wasn't good long enough, like you said.
Retired his number by the Twins as well, so that's where it should end. I mean, when you get your number retired by a team, that's legit. Doesn't make you a Hall of Famer in all cases. Keith Hernandez is going to get his number retired by the Mets this summer. He's not a Hall of Famer, but man, I mean,
he's got as much case as these guys got.
You're right about that.
Can I just throw that out there? Keith Hernandez, I looked him up the other day. He had a great career. He's got just as much right to the Hall of Fame as any of the guys we just talked about.
You're right about that. I totally agree with you 100% on that. I actually looked him up the other day too, because I saw he was going in to the Mets Ring of Honor there. One of the cool things I kind of heard today when the writer's show was on is if you get on the ballot itself, you're in the top 5% of everybody who's ever played this game. And that's unbelievable to think of. Like, everybody who was mentioned today on that ballot are the greatest players to ever play this game. And only 1% of them get into the Hall of Fame. It's nuts. It's so hard. It's an exclusive club. I don't know how guys like this sneak in and other guys don't. It's a big, I don't know. And that's another thing too, is did either of you, I was asked this earlier and I didn't really know the answer. The Veterans Committee is made up of how many guys? Do you know how many guys make that up? I believe it's
No.
15, 20, if I'm not mistaken, and you got to get 75% of that vote. So this is a bunch of guys that come together at a round table and just sit and talk about these guys that are handed off to them and make their cases. And here they go. They made a lot of noise this year. There's a lot of guys going in with David Ortiz. So we will now transition to the ballot itself that happened today. So I don't even know where to start with this. There's so many directions we can run with here. So I'm going to kind of contain this a little bit. And first of all, go with David Ortiz. Let's talk about him, David. This is a guy that you watch play a lot in his career, being a Yankees fan.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Ortiz getting in?
This is easy. He 100% deserved to be there. I'm glad he made it. You can't tell the story of the Red Sox teams that broke the curse without David Ortiz. Over 500 homers, one of the best, if not the best designated hitter ever. Big personality, fun guy. I'm in on David Ortiz getting in.
Ryan, what do you think?
Oh, he has to be in. I mean, the guy's clutch. I mean, you think of some of the big moments in the Red Sox history, you'll find something that David Ortiz did to spark them.
Yep.
I mean, I think he was as clutch as they come. Not only that, you look at his stats and his WAR and all those things. I mean, he definitely has the stats to be in.
Yep.
3-time World Series champ. He broke the curse, 10-time All-Star, was a World Series MVP. I heard something today that he's the most clutch hitter in the World Series history, I believe they said.
I'm not surprised.
I'm not surprised either.
He owned the Yankees. I hated it. It just seemed like every big moment he was the guy coming up to bat, and he just murdered the Yankees. And he's one of those guys, man, I couldn't hate him. I'm just being honest with you. I hated to see him come up, but, man, you just had to tip your cap to him. He was just good. He by definition, to me, this guy's a Hall of Famer. This is easy.
The numbers don't lie. The home runs, 541, the RBI, 1768, I believe is 21st all time in RBI. They're outstanding. And now we turn kind of back to what we talk about and what this whole thing opens up is the steroid talk. And I can't do it with the steroid guys. I just don't get this, David. I'm having a really, really hard time figuring this part out. So David Ortiz tested positive for performance enhancing drugs, and Major League Baseball basically said, since it was supposed to be anonymous, it never happened. But it did happen, and he cheated, and he took performance enhancing drugs when he was with the Twins. So now baseball has knowingly let in a steroid guy. Now there's a few guys in there that have been mentioned in Canseco's book, like Pudge Rodriguez, a few other guys that have already got in there. But now we have a guy that we know 100% is a steroid guy and has cheated. And we didn't let 6 other guys on the ballot in, and we let David Ortiz in. So now here's the can of worms that's just been opened. So, David, where do we go from here?
DJ, I don't know why you're so stumped by this. This is what's wrong with the Hall of Fame. Yep. This is it. In a nutshell, it's a popularity contest. You know where I've always stood on the steroid issue and where I'll always stand on the steroid issues. There's steroid users in the Hall of Fame right now. You have no way to prove one way or the other. So all I can do is just measure them against their peers. The greatest player to ever play the game, and it's inarguable, is Barry Bonds. And he's not in the Hall of Fame. And why is it? It's because nobody likes him.
They didn't like him.
Yeah. And so this is just stupid. I'm not going to debate Todd Helton and all these other, Scott Rowland, all these guys are good ball players. When you got a guy with 762 homers sitting over here that can't get in, it's inarguable. There's no argument that you can make that Barry Bonds shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. There's no argument that you can make that Alex Rodriguez, as bad as I hate his guts, shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. The dude's got 676 homers. But they expect us to sit around and debate whether Todd Helton should be in there. with like 300 homers and 2,000 hits, and it's a waste of time. There's 10 other guys on the ballot better than him. And so anyway, I just can't. I can't even. There's nothing to even argue about with me. It's like talking in circles. These guys have got to go in the Hall of Fame. This is open and shut case. There's guys in the steroid era that use steroids that are absolutely in the Hall of Fame. Put the famous guys in there and let's shut up, quit talking about it, and then we can talk about these other guys. That's the way I feel about it.
Ryan, what let's start with Bonds and Clemens. What are your thoughts overall on their Hall of Fame case and them as players? Like, when you think of Barry Bonds, what do you think of? Like, I know that's a very big question, but I'm just trying to like pick your brain. Like, when you think of Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, what do you think of?
I mean, I have to start off with Barry Bonds. Like, the guy I can just remember years. It was either they were intentionally walking him, or he would lay off pitches that were off the plate that everybody else would in their right mind would swing at.
Yeah.
And he had, like, his strike zone, like, he had such a great idea of what was a ball and what was a strike. And if it was in the zone, he would just demolish it. And I just remember his chase for the home run record, and everybody's tuning in watching because this guy's going to break it. And the whole steroid debate, like, I get it. Like, obviously you want people in that did it the right way, but I agree with David. At this point, there's so many people in there already that didn't do it the right way. You can't keep these guys out. I mean, just too good to keep them out of the Hall of Fame. And I think people just flat out don't want him in because they think he's a jerk. And he is, but he's got all the stats to prove it. I mean, the guy is an absolute stud, even before he started taking steroids.
And again, I just cut in here real quick. Talk back to Barry Bonds. They want to talk about character. I watched the Barry Bonds documentary the other day, and they were saying, well, character is a big part of the Hall of Fame. Oh, really? It wasn't a big part of it when Ty Cobb got elected.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a big part of it. I hate to crap on DJ's guy here, but when Kirby Puckett was sexually assaulting women, it suddenly wasn't a big part of it. Don't give me that. You know what I mean? And that's, like I said, it's
they let in who they want in. I mean,
exactly. That's 100% it. It's a popularity contest, and it's wrong.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Barry Bonds. So this changed a lot for me today from the perspective of, you let them in. You knowingly let one in now, and you didn't let Bonds and Clemens in, who are the greatest players of all time. They're on the Mount Rushmore. When you separate pitchers and position players, they're on the Mount Rushmore of pitcher,
mm-hmm.
Clemens, position player, Bonds. They're the greatest players we've ever seen in our time. And Barry Bonds is an idiot. There's no doubt about it. And nobody likes him. And they got him on that. They got it. They didn't like Clemens either. And they showed it because they made him pay for 10 years. And you had a lot of young guys coming in that are starting to get votes now. And they started voting for those guys because they weren't like that. Well, when we saw the early readings, Bonds and Clemens were in. And that's because the younger writers are posting their ballots online. And the old guys who have been doing this for years don't do that. So you knew that when the other half of these ballots come out, they're going to dip bad. And they did. They went down by about 10% because these guys who have been doing it forever have had it in their minds all the time that, hey, Bonds and Clemens are out. We'll never let them in, but we'll push David Ortiz in there. And I don't get that. And I'm seeing some of these ballots, David, and it's driving me nuts. I see a guy puts in, one of the guys on there today puts Clemens, Bonds, Sosa, and Sheffield in. Great. If you're going to go that route, fine. But if you do that, you have to put A-Rod, Manny, Ortiz.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do that.
Absolutely.
That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. If you're going to put them in, that you're not going to put these other guys in whose numbers are obviously Hall of Fame worthy. So I just don't get any of these writers. I don't understand their ballots. I look at a bunch of them and it makes no sense to me. Some of them are good. A lot of them are just crazy. It is a popularity contest, unfortunately, a lot of times, and they got it wrong today. Let's just go there. They got it wrong because now you're opening a whole new can of worms where well, why isn't A-Rod going to not get in now? And why isn't Manny Ramirez? The guys that are still on the ballot, well, just put them in now. I mean, you put David Ortiz in. So why does he get a pass and nobody else does? Blows my mind. I'm still baffled by it. I really am. Like, I don't know what just happened. What did I just see?
Yeah, it's not fair. It's just not fair. No.
And I get the whole thing, like steroids, like you got this extra power, but to have the ability to square up the ball like they still did, the talent and the ability was still there. And once you put one of these guys in, you gotta have to go ahead and let the rest. You can't do this basis on a. I mean, the fact is they got it, and so did these other guys that they put in. I mean, they've already eliminated the ability to cut these guys off.
Well, Barry Bonds, it's inarguable he was a Hall of Famer to begin with. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm going to say about all these guys. Most of these, 98% of these guys were Hall of Famers anyway. We all know players who benefited from using steroids that aren't Hall of Famers. You know, I think about Ken Caminiti. I don't know for sure that he did, but Brady Anderson hit 50 homers one year, but they couldn't sustain it. Why is that? Because they weren't elite players. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Barry Bonds, Manny Ramirez might be the greatest right-handed hitter of all time. There's an argument to be made for that. And had he not used steroids, he probably would still be in the Hall of Fame. And I just think it's ridiculous to discount all that because we don't know what pitchers we're using. We got an executive in, the guy that was over the steroid era, who 100% profited from it, knew it was going on, that goes into the Hall of Fame before these players. I mean, how big of a joke is that? But like I said, I guess this is what we're stuck with. They've got to change the way that they're voting has got to change. It has to. I saw a guy turn in a ballot that just had Omar Vizquel on it. Only Omar Vizquel. I mean, I wouldn't even mail that in. I'm serious. Yeah. Like, that's a joke.
Wow.
And, you know, going along the same thing we're saying, like Jose Canseco, like when I was a kid, man, I loved Jose Canseco. But once again, he's another guy that's a flat out jerk and nobody would vote. I mean, he won't get the votes, but stats wise, home runs wise, I mean, he's got a great case.
Yep.
Right.
He has an absolutely outstanding case. That's a good point. Canseco, me and David have talked about this. We've looked at his stats. Like, I'm putting him in, man. I mean, the Bash brothers were the most famous players of all time. We all grew up idolizing those guys. They were Popeye on, you know, out there hitting bombs like crazy and going to 3 consecutive World Series when we were kids. And just unbelievable, man. And I love the point you made earlier, Ryan, about Bonds. Bonds, I look back on his career and I'm still like baffled by what we saw. It's the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen in my entire life by a baseball player. The years that he put up and put in, nobody even comes close to that. Do I think a lot of it was fake? Absolutely. But what he did in general, and what you mentioned, which is an awesome point, his eye for that strike zone is a big reason why he had the success he had. He had that strike zone down. And every time you saw him at bat, when he had a ball called on him that was actually called a strike, he would look back and he knew. Like, some guys are just whiners about it. You know, if it's anything close and it's still missed or whatever, or still got it barely, they'll whine. But if he looked back, he was right all the time because he knew. And if he had that box down, you were done because you couldn't get a pitch by him. And he was going to make you pay every single time. He's the greatest thing I've ever seen. And he's not in the Hall of Fame. And we just let David Ortiz, who is not the greatest thing I've ever seen, but a very good player, obviously, and worthy of the Hall of Fame by his stats in. And I'm baffled, man. I don't get it. I mean, we could talk about this forever, I guess, really. We really could just keep going on this. But I'll get to the percentages here, and we'll talk real quick. We'll go through this. Ortiz got 77% of the vote. Bonds, 66. Clemens, 65. Scott Rowland, let's talk about him for a second. 63.2, David. He's getting in. Now, especially that these guys have cleared off, he becomes the top guy left on this ballot is Scott Rowland. The percentages are his. Now he's the top dog. What are your thoughts on this, man? I don't get it. He boosted from like 10% to 30% to 60%, something like that.
again, he's a very popular player, well loved. I think he has a case, but again, what are we talking about? He's probably the 13th best player on this list. So he's got a case. I think he's got an argument, but not before these other guys.
So Ryan, to kind of put you on the spot a little bit here, Kurt Schilling, 58.6. He was 70% last year and dropped another 12%. I guess the 12% just all of a sudden woke up and thought he wasn't awesome anymore and stopped voting for him. That's another thing that drives me nuts. If you vote for a guy one year, stick with it. And he 12%. So I don't know how many votes. That's a lot of votes that stopped voting for him. And it's obviously because of his mouth and the things that he said in the past. So now we've got the police out again on all this character clause and have kept another guy out because of character. So what are your thoughts on that whole Schilling thing, man?
And it's terrible asking me about a Phillies player. I'm just going to be honest, but I have to flat out give him credit. The guy was a stud. He absolutely there. And I think it's also the political side, because he's been so, adamant about vocalizing his, political, beliefs. Once again, I think it's a total cop out. They'll keep him out, but he's another guy that no doubt needs to be in.
David, what are your thoughts on that, man? Real quick, Schilling.
Yeah, Schilling's that's easy button. He should definitely be in. One of the greatest pitchers of our era, that we can remember. So big playoff moments, the bloody sock, all that good stuff. It's easy. It's all political. It's obvious. I'm out on the cancel culture and all that stuff. You're either a Hall of Famer or you're not, and he definitely is.
It's unbelievable. That's a crock right there. The Veterans Committee needs to get that right for him. He needs to be a Hall of Famer. Todd Helton got 52%. He's trending in the right direction as well. Billy Wagner, 51%, also went up a little bit. But I can't believe only half the people voted for one of the greatest closers of all time. Who guys, listen to this stat. Ks per 9, number 1 is Billy Wagner all time. That's unbelievable. I'm sorry. If his strikeout rate is number 1 all time, and he has the amount of saves that he has and the amount of dominance he had over all those years, throwing with his non-dominant pitching hand as well. He used to be a righty, and all of a sudden, I can throw 100 miles an hour with my left hand. Oh, that's cool. So what a freak athlete, to be honest with you, man. And I don't get it. We'll talk about a few of the guys that fell off the ballot here that are closers. Andrew Jones, this is one I wanted to get to with you, Ryan. He got 41.4% of the vote. Talk to me about Andrew Jones.
I just don't. I know there's a lot of people that are down on Andrew Jones just because of, I personally, I think it's another one where he has a past, some things that have come up before in his personal life. But I think from a stats standpoint, how do you not put Andrew Jones in? He has a 62 WAR in his career, which is way above so many people that have made the Hall of Fame. He's probably one of the greatest center fielder, that I've ever seen. Just his way that he would respond to a ball off the bat. I've never seen anybody, just have as quick a reaction as him. And obviously I'm biased. I'm a Braves fan. So, but I just think he's, and the defensive side oftentimes hasn't been, brought into that aspect, but I think he hands down deserves to be in.
Yep. He's definitely got an awesome case for sure. And his defense in center field, no doubt, legit. Gary Sheffield, 40%. Gary Sheffield. Think about that, man. This is one of the greatest players of all time. And he got 40% of the vote. Okay, whatever. Alex Rodriguez, 34%. I heard something today that when Clemens and Bonds first got on the ballot, this was the number that they got. So they feel like A-Rod's going to do the same thing. He's going to go up every year and fall short after his 10 years. It's going to happen to him just like it did Bonds and Clemens. So looks like A-Rod's in trouble as well. It's crazy to me, man. I really don't understand that as well. Jeff Kent, who has the most home runs ever by a second baseman, 32%. Not even one person out of 3 voted him into the Hall of Fame. I'm baffled on that one as well.
Yeah.
Manny Ramirez, who David just said is one of the greatest right-handed hitters of all time, 28%. Omar Vizquel fell about 15 to 20% this year because of the off the field issues that he had. So we're once again being the police on everything. We're looking at off the field stuff. This is, like you said, David, it's not just steroids with these guys on the ballot. It's the trouble that they're getting into with the law. It's the shillings that's political. And then all of a sudden, whatever you did in your career, you're done.
Don't matter.
You let Ty Cobb in, who's a known murderer, into the Hall of Fame. So I don't know, man. There's a lot of problems here. Sammy Sosa. Ryan, we talked in a great length last week about Sammy Sosa, and 18% of the vote for a guy who had the best 3-year stretch of anybody ever in the history of the game. You're going to give Bonds and Clemens 60%, and nobody's ever voted for Sosa. And they always make the argument, well, he got made by steroids. He never was a good player before steroids. I get that, but if you're going roid guy, you got to put him in as well. That's not even close. That's a no-brainer. What are your thoughts on that, Ryan? I want to pick your brain on that a little bit. So why does a guy like Barry Bonds get 60% and Sammy Sosa get 18%? Do you think it's because Bonds was before he got roids and Sosa wasn't? Or what do you think that boils down to?
I think there's a case to be made that, Barry Bonds, when he was with the Pirates, I mean, he was putting up still incredible numbers. And I think also the other thing about Sammy Sosa, maybe that people will highly remember. I still remember the corked bat deal. Do y'all remember that?
Oh, yeah.
When his bat broke and they came out and they looked and he was using a corked bat. So not only was he using steroids, but you had like corked bat. Like, yeah, I think some of those things sometimes stand out in people's minds. And like you said, I think maybe with Sammy Sosa was the fact that, before the roids, I don't know that we knew a whole lot about him, but I still think the guy should be in. You look at his stats, it's just there's no way you can keep a guy like that out.
Yeah.
His baseball reference page says he's 6 foot, 165 pounds, Ryan. 165. 165 pounds. So,
no.
Royd's been very, very good to him. Pettit got 10%. That's a crock too. If you're letting in Hall of steroid guys, one of the greatest lefties of all time. Jimmy Rollins got 9.4. A little surprised by that, David. I thought he'd get a little more love. The way it was talking, I thought Rollins was going to get a whole lot more love than he did. He almost fell off the ballot. Bobby Abreu, who I think has an awesome Hall of Fame case, 8.6%, not even close. Mark Burley stayed on the ballot with 5.8. Torrey Hunter stayed on with 5.3. So they barely are going to advance. Guys who are off, just like this. Joe Nathan is a top 10 closer of all time, Ryan. And he's gone in the first year of eligibility. So, man, we just kicked off one of the greatest closers of all time in this first year on the ballot, David. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't get it. The closure thing is rough.
It is.
I don't really know what makes Lee Smith Lee Smith was an all-time save leader for a while, so that's why he's in, but Joe Nathan's not, or Billy Wagner's not. Equally as dominant, just maybe more save opportunities. But I think this is going to change over time. I think the era of the late inning reliever is now. So these guys like that aren't closers are becoming more and more important. And so I think you're going to see a few of these guys start to sneak in sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
Good point, man. Tim Hudson, who we said had a pretty cool case, 222 wins, did not extend. He's at 3%.
That's a joke, man. That is a joke.
Unbelievable. And Tim Hudson pitched for the Braves, Ryan. So talk about him a minute.
Man, I love Tim Hudson. That guy was just a great pitcher. You look at him and he was always like a small framed pitcher. Like you look at him and how in the world does this guy throw the way that he does? But he was dominant. Like he had years, he was just dominating people, and how he could just drop off so quickly. I'll never get that. And then not only that, just you look at his stats, incredible. I mean, even all the way from the A's, all the way with the Braves and on through his career, I think he has a case to be in.
Yeah.
She would have stuck
absolutely.
around a little longer, man. That's quick, 1 and out. That should have never happened to him. Tim Lincecum's off with 2%. Ryan Howard's out with 2%. Mark Teixeira got 1.5%. Mark Teixeira has over 400 home runs and is one of the greatest switch hitters of all time, guys. And he's out in his first year of eligibility. That is garbage.
That is garbage.
To me, he's one of the guys on this ballot that is a first-year guy that I thought had a better case than almost everybody. And he's out just like that, which is unbelievable to me. Justin Morneau, 1%. Jonathan Papelbon, who's also top 10 closer of all time, is out at 1%. Prince Fielder got 0.5%. AJ Pierzynski got 0.5. Whoever voted for him needs to get their ballot taken away and never be able to vote again. And Carl Crawford and Jake Peavy rounded out with 0.0. They didn't even get one vote. But still really cool that they were on the ballot. Like we were talking about earlier, 5% of the guys that ever played this game are on the ballot. So overall, man, I guess I'll just round out my thoughts on this year's ballot with, I don't know. I can't really congratulate David Ortiz because I don't feel like he deserved it because he cheated. So I don't know what this does for me as far as I think I'm going to take this stance moving forward, David, is I won't personally ever vote for anybody who gets in there, but I'm going to take another look at this when we start doing these things. Is I'm going to look at it like, hey, if we're going off of just the numbers, then yes, he is, or no, he isn't. I think that's what I have to do moving forward, because I'll always plead my case that they shouldn't get in, but if you let one in, now you should just let them all in. And it's a crock. So closing thoughts on the Hall of Fame, David.
Yeah, I agree. I hope the floodgates do open and we get legitimate Hall of Famers in there instead of having to debate whether guy is one. The obvious one's got to go in. So I hope this does open the floodgates.
So here we go, Ryan, talking about your career, man. This is a fun part of the show. And talking about your fandom here as well. So let's start with your fandom with the Braves. Talk about when you were a kid, how you became a Braves fan, how all that all boiled down. Talk about your favorite players when you were a kid, when you were in high school, like the college age, and now kind of talk about that, how you feel as far as your Braves fandom goes.
Oh man, how do I even begin? So I grew up outside of Atlanta, and I remember like early '90s going from worst to first, and man, just if you know Atlanta sports, man, Atlanta sucks. I mean, over the years, like what do they ever win in? You know, it was so when the Braves finally got good, it was like for Atlanta, it was ginormous. Finally, we had something to root for, and I mean, I can still remember as a kid, Sid Bream with his huge knee brace coming and sliding into home plate and like finally making it into the playoffs. And so for me, it was just, I don't know, you see them come from like nothing, like from these people that nobody knew. And all of a sudden they're putting together winning teams. And then you got all these young stud pitchers that they're bringing up. I mean, like Steve Avery, Tom Glavine, John Smoltz. I mean, those are just the guys that you think back to them. And then not long after that, how do you not like Chipper Jones? I mean, the guy, they draft him. I mean, just a stud switch hitter. You just didn't see that very often, and could hit equally as well, just both sides of the plate. I mean, for me, those are the guys I always think back of. But to me, I think I look back as a Braves fan and I think, I know everybody loved Bobby Cox, and I'll have like not so great of a take on Bobby Cox. I feel like he should have won far more World Series than we did. To win one with all those players that they had, I think I'll go ahead and say he's overrated. I mean, think of how many like managers you could have surely got more than one World Series with that kind of pitching staff. That's crazy to me.
It's a good point.
How many division titles in a row was it? 10,
Was it like 13 or
13, something
14?
like that. Yeah, it
Something
was
like that.
unbelievable. And
And
every
you
year,
look at
man.
all those studs, like how do you go with Greg Maddux, Tom Glavine, John Smoltz, and
Yeah.
not be able to come up with more? So I think like I go back to those years and I think, man, I wish we could have gotten some more than just one, you know.
Yeah.
But man, just love the Braves. I like some weird guys. Like I think back to Ryan Klesko. I don't know if you guys know that name. That guy had
Oh, yeah.
like the biggest swing ever. It was like he would fully connect or he missed everything. I loved how he would just take a huge uppercut on everything. He was just trying to launch it as far as he could go. He looked like he was going to throw his back out every time he swung the bat. I mean, it was just a crazy swing. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. So it brings us to this year. So that had to be absolutely awesome for you, man. It's been since 1995. You were in junior high in 95, probably, right? Probably a junior high
Right.
kid.
Yeah, I would have been junior high.
Yeah. So from that time until now, you've gone a big old drought with no World Series titles, man. So talk us through this playoff run and this team and this World Series and what that meant to you, man. Absolutely awesome.
I look at this and I think, how in the world did it happen this year?
Yeah.
Like when, I'm just going to say it, like when Ronald Acuna went down, I said, that's it. Like
Yeah.
the years, like you can't lose your best player, this young stud that was basically carrying the team. Like, I don't get me wrong, Freddie Freeman's awesome, all those things. But when you lose a main player like that, I think, you know, Alex Anthopoulos, when he made those moves and I mean, to bring in Jorge Soler and Eddie Rosario and these guys, like that guy deserves whatever he made this year, because that totally dramatically changed the whole course of the playoffs for the Braves. They don't make those moves, they don't even get in. And so I think, you know, look back at that and think, how in the world? I mean, he literally hit on every single one of those moves. That's what won the Braves the World Series. I mean, just to bring them in, and those guys carried the team.
So
Yeah.
true, man. We've talked many times on this show about how he saved their season with the moves he made. Absolutely dominant, man. So you had to you had to have just absolute joy when that happened. So I got to ask you, did you go back home and were you hanging on the street lights, falling all over the place at the parade or anything like that?
Like, honestly, like, okay, so my father-in-law is like the biggest Dodgers fan you've ever seen.
Oh, wow.
For me, when they knocked the Dodgers out of it, that was the World Series for me. That's all I cared about. Like, I just wanted to be able to come in with my big Brave stuff on in front of him and say, you know, how you doing? I mean, that's just like, for me, knocking out the Dodgers. Like, I hate the Dodgers because they've knocked us out every year, and they got this ginormous, you know, contracts and how much money they throw in, and I get to hear, you know, all this stuff about it. And when they knocked them out, like at that point, the World Series was icing on the cake. You have those teams you just hate. Like, if you knock them out, I'm good.
That's
Right?
absolutely awesome, man. That's so awesome. It's like I go back to when the Bulls finally knocked the Pistons off and started winning the titles. Like when they knocked the Pistons out, I was like, that's it. And then they ended up being the Lakers in the title, and I was like, well, we beat the Pistons. I mean, who cares? We beat the Lakers. Like, we finally got by the Pistons. So yeah, I totally understand that, man. But yeah, so Ryan, man, you were obviously a teammate of ours at Tennessee Temple University. So start with high school. Give me a little roundup of where you went to high school and how your high school days went as a player.
All right, so I grew up, went to high school just outside of Atlanta, a little area called Snellville, Georgia. I went to South Gwinnett High School where I played baseball. I did it my freshman and sophomore year in high school. But after my sophomore year, I did kind of something weird. Like, so I just decided that I was going to step out of the high school team and started doing more travel baseball with different teams, you know, in the area. And not a traditional route by any means, because most people would say, you know, just stick with the high school team. But it was one of those things for me. I just really wanted to step out and do more of the travel league stuff. So that's how I kind of had my career in high school. It was a really big, you know, 5A public school, you know, program. And it was one of those things where I just really wanted to be able to do the travel team. thing in the Atlanta area, which was really big at that time. So that's kind of, I was primarily third base pitcher, at that time, but it wasn't like I was getting recruited to go anywhere, to college to play baseball. So it was, if I could go to college and I could play it, that it would be awesome. But I was pretty much determined I was going to go to Temple.
So yeah, like you were talking about, Atlanta area right now is a hotbed for a lot of the top prospects in the game. It always has been and always probably will be.
Right.
All those areas around Atlanta have produced some of the top picks in the draft over the years. And I think of Dansby Swanson for sure, right off the top of my head. And there's even more
We
than
had
that.
Jeff Francoeur. We had like
Yeah.
Brian McCann. All those guys were right there in the area where we were at. Played against some of those guys. So yeah, definitely.
That's awesome, man. Very cool. So you mentioned that you had Temple on your mind. So when did you make that decision? What year in high school did you say I'm going to Tennessee Temple?
Well, it would have been my senior year. I was looking at between Tennessee Temple and I was looking at y'all remember North Greenville?
Yeah.
I think we played them a few times. So I was looking at those two schools. And so it was pretty much my senior year. I felt like God was calling me onto the ministry and was basically looking at some places where I could go to get some Bible school. And if I could play baseball when I did it, then even better. Like that to me would pretty much finalize where I was going.
Absolutely awesome. So did you talk to Coach Hall, or how did all that work out to get you on the team?
That's kind of a weird story. So like I came to Temple, when I first went as a senior and kind of tried out, I came to, was it called Crusader Days? Do you guys remember that? It was primarily basketball.
Yeah.
I thought it was for like all athletics. So I showed up on that day and I was like the only baseball guy there. Everybody else was basketball. And so it's like Coach Hall was like, yeah, well, we don't normally get baseball players here. So come over here. We'll let you hit in the cages, that kind of thing. And afterwards, he's like, are you interested in playing baseball? And I was like, well, I mean, I'd like to, but I'm looking at North Greenville as well. He never said anything to me. So I was like, okay, well, nothing, necessarily going to work out here. So anyway, nothing worked out at the other North Greenville where I was looking at going. So I enrolled my freshman year, 2000 at Temple. And while I was in enrollment and going through the line, Coach Hall walks through and he says, are you coming to Temple? I said, oh, yeah, I'm enrolling. He's like, are you wanting to play baseball still? I was like, well, I didn't hear anything from you, so I didn't think anything was going to work out. So he talked to me. It was kind of a strange deal. He's like, why don't you come by my office afterwards? And this was during enrollment, my freshman year. He's like, why don't you come by my office? We'll talk and just see what we can get worked out. And that's kind of how things kind of got in place. Which I didn't come there knowing that I was going to play baseball. He caught me in enrollment when I was there freshman year.
That's so funny.
That's not like a traditional baseball story. I wish it was cooler than that. Like I was invited, but I wasn't.
So Ryan, you graduated in 2004, correct?
Yeah, I did, 2004.
Okay, so your freshman year would have been 2001 baseball wise. So you came in, David and I, sophomore year. Talk about your first year there. How did it go for you? How much playing time were you getting in the first year? What were your thoughts overall on the team? That kind of stuff. Playing at Ingle Stadium as well. What were your thoughts on all that?
Oh my goodness, how could you not come into Temple and go to Ingle Field and that not get you fired up? I mean, like you think of like we have the greatest baseball field
Absolutely
of anywhere. And I mean, just the fact that you get to go out there and play that, how do you not sit there and think this is the greatest place ever? So, I mean, getting to see that field and play on it, for all of our games was just incredible. And just coming into our team, I mean, just a great memories. I think of you guys and just you guys, we stepped in. I wasn't playing much, I was like a backup third baseman and it seemed like partway through the year, then he kind of let me start starting as a starting pitcher a few games and work my way in gradually. But, you're just trying to learn the ropes. And you guys are just, it was so funny because, I mean, it seemed like we had a pretty big size freshman class coming in that year. So there was a lot of freshmen, but man, you guys were really good breaking in the rookies when we got there, all these freshmen.
So
There were so many funny things that happened that year. People, opening their mouths and us getting put in our place, so we knew what the pecking order was.
Trust me, we all went through it. We've talked about that on the show.
Absolutely.
Man. Sure.
You guys remember when Jason Hart made the statement to Brian Howard, he said the moose is loose. I thought he was going to kill him. When we were running out in the outfield and Hart was making just like a funny joke off the collar, kind of thing. And when he called him the moose is loose when he was running in the outfield, I think Howard was going to kill him. I mean, it was just one of the funniest things. We were like, what were you thinking? He's like, it was the first thing that came to my mind. I didn't know what else to say. Oh, man.
That's so funny.
He got hazed for that one. That wasn't great.
Jason Hart, I had to stop him a lot of times from saying a lot of different things, man. He almost got killed a few times on the team. So
yes, he did. But man, that guy's so funny.
Yes, he
really did just say whatever came to his mind. We had to help him out, man. Maybe keep some of that back.
That's awesome, man. So talk about sophomore year. Sophomore year, you were getting more steady playing time there. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it was a little bit more entrenched being able to start as a pitcher. Man, you look back at it, I don't know if it's this way for you guys because it's been so stinking long. Like all the years start blending together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know I started getting a little more time. I think Jason Morgan, he was still the starting third baseman, but they were sprinkling me in some different places, kind of moving around as there was a need, but it was more still starting pitching. Not a whole lot, starting position wise, but making my way to the field a little bit more in that year.
Yep. And then junior year, you took off and were a full-time starter for us there. So talk about that year a little bit.
Yeah, that year I was more getting to play third base regularly. And, when I wasn't doing that, then we'd move over to pitcher. That was always one of the unique things at our school was that shifting between pitching and going to a position.
Yep.
That's unique. Like you feel like at times like you're battling the whole arm fatigue deal.
Oh,
and,
no doubt.
That was always, I always remember back to that, and man, just feel like at times like your arm's just going to fall off. You're just pushing through. But yeah, that's what I remember from that year.
That's awesome, man. And then your senior year, me and David were gone by then. So talk a little bit about your senior year.
Yeah, my senior year was ruined early because in fall league, we were playing against, man, what was that community college we always seem to play in the fall?
Rome State or Chat State?
Cleveland State.
Cleveland State, that was it. So we were playing Cleveland State and in a fall league game, and I totally messed up my knee. Like it was a sharp line drive to the shortstop and I was going back to first base. Well, when I went to push off to go back into first base, my leg, all my weight came down on my left leg and my knee snapped backwards and out. And I tore my ACL and PCL in my last year there. So that was the rest of my college career.
That was in the fall?
That was in the fall.
Man.
Before the season ever started.
Wow.
And so my nerve damage in my leg, it was bent like a hammock. The nerves were bent like a hammock inside of my leg. So that was pretty much the end of my career. I didn't get to play the senior year. That was a tough deal to just kind of watch the last year go by and not get to play.
No doubt.
So did you end up traveling with them at all that senior year, or did you kind of just stay away?
I pretty much, for the most part, stayed away. I had to do a lot of therapy, a lot of rehab. And as a matter of fact, like it's kind of a weird thing, but it's still, my leg still hasn't completely healed back. Like the whole top of the bottom of my leg down to the top of my foot, I still don't have feeling on the top of it. Like for the nerve never coming back from it. So there was still a lot of, during that year, I was just having to go to therapy and different things consistently throughout the year that I didn't go on a lot of the big trips. But if they were home, I would go to those games. A lot of those I was there.
Gotcha, man. So is there any other stories that you wanted to talk about here?
Oh man, how do we even begin? Like I feel like there's some clear in the air here that I need to get from some of you guys, like, and get the legit stories from things that happen. Like, one of my favorite memories is that when we went down to Florida and we took the Navy van and it had the rainbow TTU sticker on the side. David, do you know anything about that?
I am familiar. I was involved with that along with Lee Salyers, and I tried to bring it up with Ben Foster because, to be honest, he was in the middle of that, and he was denying it. But that is also one of my favorite memories as well, because what cracks me up about that story is after we got it off, we kind of flipped out, and it was like, dude, we better paint that or something, because it was this huge gray thing on the back of the bus. And the next day, it never even phased Coach. He goes to the back of the bus. We're all standing there watching, and opens it, never even acknowledges it that it happened. And we did get some blue spray paint somewhere along the line and tried to like cover it up. But
I just remember walking out and wondering, how long is it going to take for him to notice? And like, it never happened.
Never dawned on him.
And we were just so thankful, because here we were, a bunch of dudes driving around in Florida with rainbow TTU stickers. Yeah. And nobody wanted to drive around like that. All of us were like, we were ready to throw a party because we were no longer, the gay band.
Exactly.
Oh man, that was good stuff. Between that one and then somebody lacing Dusty, like his Twinkie with some X-Lax, and y'all were like waving toilet paper around from the other van. And I don't know if I was driving the other van or just in the other van. And Morgan was waving toilet paper out the side of the van driving back. And Dusty was in our van and he was saying, I wonder why they're waving toilet paper around. And we were just sitting there, we were dying because everybody knew that he had an X-Lax in his Twinkie. And he ate that thing. And I don't know if it ever impacted him. I don't think it ever did anything to him.
No. So Micah, what's Micah's last name?
Micah Miller, yeah.
Micah Miller got the turbo pukes. I don't know if you remember that from that. And Dusty, it just nothing. He ate it like it was candy. Didn't phase him. So
he was just laughing about it in the van like nothing happened. And I'm like sitting there thinking, man, this guy's stomach, like what in the world? Like he totally took it like it was candy, didn't even phase him.
Oh, man. That was the same trip, I believe.
I think it was.
I know that happened in Florida. Let me put it that way.
And between that and Matt Locklear, I don't know if you guys remember that, us pulling up to a light down there in Florida, and he had this Cherokee yell. Do y'all remember how he would do that? Yes, I do. And he did the loudest Cherokee yell at that light, and he scared the crap out of these guys in a truck next to us, these construction workers. And they were like telling us to pull over, like they wanted to fight us all because he would do this yell. Well, these guys jump in the car next to him and scared the crap out of them. And like they were so angry, they were ready to take us on for a fight. And man, Locklear's yell, like if you've never heard that, like you can hear it for miles away. That guy has an unbelievable yell.
That's so funny. I've never heard that story.
Did y'all not remember that?
I remember the yell because it was done on my floor a whole lot, but
he would do it when we pulled up at lights. Like he did it to an elderly couple. Like we were like, man, they're gonna have a heart attack. Somebody's gonna die, and you're gonna be held responsible for it. I mean, he would just every time he'd give it another yell, and man, it was so funny. Like to see people's reaction. Nobody ever expects that when you're at a light. I mean, just he would light people up.
That's awesome.
Well, I don't deny that for 1 second because I was his roommate for a year, and loud is a very good word for him. And he was a lot of fun, man. No doubt about it.
Oh, man.
Well, let me say this for you, man. I always thought that your sophomore year, you should have played over a certain third baseman. I'll just throw that out there. I don't really care if it's on video or not. So I really wish you would have had a little more starting under your belt there for sure. I think you deserved it, no doubt. You were a really good pitcher for us too, man. And you were a really good player there. And I always like after we left, man, and I had heard that your knee blew out and you were done. I was heartbroken for you, man. It was a hard time back then when we were during that little time. Cell phones were just kind of becoming a thing, and we lost contact with each other for a long time there. We didn't have social media. Was no texting really till we got a little older. And so those times there were a little bit of a blur for seeing anybody or talking to anybody. But yeah, man, I always felt terrible that your senior year ended that way, man. What a terrible way for that to happen. And definitely felt really bad for you too, man. And before we go here, I did want to mention Coach Hall had said something to me about you. I was talking to him about you a couple weeks back, and he had some words for you as far as the kind of player and man you've become. So he says, Ryan was a good player, but an even better person. He was a big guy, but so soft-spoken that spoke with his bat and his arm. I will never forget the day he tore his ACL at practice. I can still see him turning to get back to first base and falling to the ground. It broke my heart. That year we won 26 games, and had he been on the mound pitching his turn, no doubt we could have won 32 to 33 games that year. He had a heart for people. Knew God was going to use him in a big way, and he has and still is. So those are words from Coach to you. Man, you guys were really good that senior year. You guys took off there. You had a really good senior class, and I think he's right, man. You guys would have gone over the 30 win mark for sure if you were on the mound. That would have made a huge difference for them, having Foster and you, and I can't remember some of the other guys that may have been. Dusty might have still been.
Hater. I mean, how do you not, like, when you got Ben Foster on your team?
Was Dusty still there too? Dusty, right?
Yeah, and Dusty. I mean, those guys, those were studs, man. I was just like fortunate to be on a good team with those guys. And I think of you guys, like, just seriously, like, how could we not say, like, when DJ's out in center field, like, that guy was like full blast. I think of a guy like the full hustle all the time and would just literally, you'd throw your body into walls to go catch the ball. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And then David Swor, didn't you throw like a no-hitter?
Yeah, I did.
Oh my God. Like, I wish I had one game that was like that. I mean, that would have been amazing. I would just shut down my career after a no-hitter and said, hey, I think I'm going to go out this way. But man, just you guys were awesome to play with and just so good to the rest of us. And I wish we wouldn't have lost, as much contact, but it's really good being able to see you guys again.
Yeah, man, this has been awesome. We're proud of you, man. What you've done, pastor in there and missionary before that. That's amazing, man. And it's just great to see a lot of our teammates serving the Lord, and it's just awesome to see.
Feel the same way, man. Hopefully it won't be this long next time we'll see each other.
Absolutely.
Sure, man. I second exactly what David said. You also got a great head of hair, man. I'm so jealous of all you guys, man.
So it's starting to recede a little bit up here.
Yeah.
It's coming in.
I'm not even taking my hat off to show you how bad mine's got over the years. So you guys blow me away. I don't know how you do it, but yeah, you're looking good, man, and you're doing awesome things, man. So thanks very much for coming on the show, man. I hope you had a good time. Don't be shy. Like I said, we'll have to get together sometime, or have to get you back on here sometime in the future as well. And thanks for all your input and everything tonight, man.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys.
Well, David, that wraps up this episode. Crazy day with the Hall of Fame. Man, everything's changed. So I'll just leave it at that. This whole Hall of Fame thing has definitely changed with what has happened today. So they will all be enshrined this summer. We will talk about that in a future episode. So next week we will have another Hill on the show, but this time it'll be Josh and not Ryan. So we'll have him on next week. That'll be a lot of fun as well. He's coming on the show next Tuesday night. So everybody go to our YouTube page and please subscribe to our channel, and everybody have a great night.
Yeah, we'll see you guys.
Yeah.